Maria, assalamu alaikum and welcome to Inspire FM.
Walaikum assalam. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much for, of course, joining us at a very, very early time, all the way, of course, from Houston, Texas. Thank you so much for your time, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you here on Inspire FM. And of course, listeners, just to let you know how grateful we are, because of course the time over there in Houston is at 2 a.m. So for Mario to be available at this time, it's absolutely amazing. So a massive, massive thank you from myself personally, the radio station. And of course our listeners. Mario, of course, we're here to talk about the case around, of course, Dr. Aafia. There's been so much, of course, as we know, around on social media, on WhatsApp. Many people will probably know different bits and bobs about what's happened. For those, of course, of our listeners out there who have a very light picture of the situation, if you could just maybe start from the beginning on the case of Dr. Aafia, how long it's been going on, and on what's the history surrounding this.
Sure. So it really is an incredible and long story, but I'm going to try to distill it down because I think you have to appreciate where it all began to appreciate where we are now. Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, her and her three children were picked up off of the streets of Pakistan in what we now understand to be a joint operation led by the American CIA and the Pakistani government. As a result of false intelligence, bad intelligence, the CIA came to think that Aafia was somebody that was more important than she really was. And by that, I mean that they thought she was some sort of extremist figure, which we now understand she's not. And I'll explain how we've come to understand that. So she's driving in a car with her three children. She's stopped. The car is surrounded. Her and her three children are abducted. I think what will always baffle me most about this case, having worked some pretty horrifying stories of traumatic things that have happened to people. Aafia's story is truly remarkable because her children were with her. One was likely killed in the process, 6-month-old Suleiman. We believe he was dropped on his head during the time of the abduction. Mariam, who was only 3 years old at the time, was taken from her mother, forcibly adopted into a white Christian family, where she then remained for 6 years until then president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, helped recover her. And again, he's provided us a detailed statement of those efforts. Ahmed was taken into various Afghan prisons where he was kept for 5 years until, through the dogged efforts of Fawzia, Aafia's sister, Dr. Fawzia Siddiqui, this brilliant Harvard-trained neurologist, along with the Red Cross, helped find him. And keep in mind, these are American children, and the American government has done this to American children. Until this day, there's been sort of no acknowledgement or any process to sort of rectify those facts. And then Aafia herself was, we believe, the only woman to have been put through the CIA's rendition to torture program, which is just a fancy legal phrase for being kidnapped and then held without any charge and subjected to some of the most horrific things a person can be subjected to. And I understand this is a breakfast show, so I'll spare your listeners the details, but we have now gotten, decades after sort of the fog of war has lifted, we now have a very clear understanding of what Aafia and others in places like Bagram prison were subjected to. And Aafia experienced the full brunt of that as not just a prisoner of, the war of terror, but as a woman. So after those 5 years of captivity without any charge, the Americans realized she's not of any importance. And she's given a young boy. She's told that that's her son. She's told, you're free to go. She's given some magazines so she can catch up on where the world is at in those 5 years. And she's sent on her way to Ghazni province. And, Aafia could have just been free at that point. But unfortunately, she's become a massive figure of importance in Pakistan. So the Pakistani government can't just have Aafia running around. She's become known as the daughter of Pakistan. And at one point, 1 million people have marched on the streets for her. So in what we've now come to understand, an operation by the Pakistani government, which was really designed to have Afia taken out, you know, she was meant to be killed at this point, but she survived along with her son. And we can say this now confidently because my co-counsel, Clive Stafford Smith, has made several trips to Afghanistan. We have not only met the men who were in prison in Bagram and various CIA black sites with Afia, we've met the tailor that stood in the way of the bullets that were meant to be for Afia. And he's shared this with us. He's one of our witnesses. And then just sum up, at this point, the Americans get there and Afia is being held in a room. They enter the room and they're caught by surprise to see Afia peek her head around the corner of a yellow curtain that she'd been behind, and she's unrestrained. So one of the American soldiers yells out, "She's on the loose," and shoots her 2 times in the stomach. And at this point, the facts that were presented in the Southern District of New York were that Afia, who was at this point, after 5 years of captivity, all of less than 100 pounds, lunched for these big bad soldiers' guns and tried to shoot up the place. That was the narrative that was put forward, but we know now demonstrably how untrue that is. There was never any physical evidence against Afia at any point. And really the charges against her that locked her up for 86 years were attempted murder of US officials. And even if you were to not believe the facts that I've just shared with you, which again, they're true, we have tons of evidence, we have tons of witnesses. Even if you were to not believe these facts, what we're looking at is 86 years, a death sentence for attempted murder, something that would get you maybe 10 to 12 years. And that's really the basis of the clemency petition we've put forward with President Biden, saying, please commute her sentence to time already served, which she's done 16 years, because this is a disproportionately high sentence for somebody who did nothing, who was the only one to be shot 2 times in the stomach and nearly die. So that's the posture of the case.
No, thank you so much, Mario, for that detailed introduction. And of course, I hope that the listeners are able to actually kind of understand, of course, the whole story so far and how this has actually panned out and on what's happened so far. I actually wasn't aware that after 5 years she was actually released and went back, and then these latest, of course, charges and how Afi has come back. So thank you for that. In regards to the current state as we stand, I know you said she served 16 years of the sentence which she shouldn't have had in the first place. Where is Afia currently being held at the moment?
Yeah, so when Clive, my co-counsel, approached me to ask me to be on this case earlier in 2024, he'd already been working on the case for a year. And, hearing the story that I've just shared with your listeners was remarkable because Afia was she had been a figure in my life who I'd known bits and pieces of about since I was 16 years old. But what was most shocking to me was that she was 4 hours from where I am. So I'm in Houston, Texas, and Afia is serving her 86-year unjust sentence at Fort Worth, Texas. FMC Carswell is the name of the prison. It's a federal women's center. And I think that I encourage your listeners to look it up. I've sued this prison. We're currently in the middle of litigation on several fronts. And I encourage your listeners to really look up the mass incarceration system and that problem of mass incarceration that we have here in America and how it disproportionately harms people of color. And FMC Carswell is meant to be a federal prison run by the US government and an only medical center in the country for particularly vulnerable women. So she's supposed to be getting treatment at this institution that should be repairing this damage, but unfortunately, it's only made her nightmare so much worse. And that's something I can also get into of what I mean by that.
Yes, please do.
I was just at FMC Carswell for a legal visit on Thursday. I just saw Afia, and I go every month. And Clive and I have visited the prison as attorneys more than any other member of the American bar has visited any of the other prisoners. And that means that there's just no oversight on this place. And the prison officials, the guards there, the staff there has really taken advantage of that. There's been 13 convictions of prison officials there for sexual violence against the female inmates. And unfortunately, Afia is a victim of that. So we've sued the prison for the sexual harm that she suffered. We've also sued them for a host of other violations of Afia's constitutional rights, because here in the US, your constitutional rights, if you're in the US, your constitutional rights don't just end once you go to prison. In fact, that's when you need them the most, because now you're at the mercy of that power dynamic that prison officials have over prisoners, and you've sort of disappeared into a black hole where if injustice is happening to you, unless somebody like Clive and I are showing up monthly, nobody really knows. And I fully came to appreciate this when I realized 13 officials had been convicted of sexual assault against other inmates, including a Christian chaplain that works there, including the cook that works there. I mean, it's wild to me that this was happening 4 hours from where I am. And then most recently, the issue that we've sued them over is their denial to Afia of her religious freedoms. So we had been trying to get Imam Umar Suleiman, who's a world-renowned scholar who's in Dallas, just a 40-minute drive, and had offered his services pro bono to give Afia that religious solace she so desperately is in need of right now. And he had offered to provide those services on a weekly basis to her pro bono. All that was needed was to set up an appointment for a visit with the clergyman of her faith, which is a very standard practice in prisons. You have priests and rabbis and what have you readily available. In fact, when I visit Afia, I walk past the room where those visits take place. You have an on-site chaplain, and that chaplain had ironically been the one to tell Afia, I think you should meet with a clergyman of your own faith, because poor Afia had started carrying around a Bible and speaking to the only available clergyman on site, which was a priest. And her questions he was not able to answer. And he was the prison staff had been the one to say, speak to somebody of your own faith. So when she sought that out, and we tried to set it up, a year into, the sort of blocks that they put into just the basic dignities of life for these prisoners, including Afia, we just decided to turn to the courts for relief, and inshallah we'll succeed on that.
Inshallah. No, thank you so much. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for Afia and of course any other prisoners out there who are denied such rights. Just of course bringing the listeners up to date with what the current, of course I know that a lot of listeners may have seen the WhatsApp messages and the various social media coverage on the current petition that's out there. What is the current petition asking for, and what's the background around on this?
Yeah, so the current petition is asking for President Biden to take action in the remaining days, on frankly hours left in his administration, to give Afia her freedom. And that can look like either him commuting her sentence to time already served. She's done 16 years of her sentence at Carswell. That doesn't include the 5 years before that in CIA captivity in Afghanistan. So, commuting her sentence to the 16 years she served at Carswell, or releasing her on compassionate grounds, because frankly, Afia is not doing well, right? She's very ill. She's in desperate need of proper medical treatment that is certainly not being provided at Carswell, where they've not once acknowledged the PTSD and the trauma of her past. I mean, if you can imagine a medical center and medical professionals who have failed to acknowledge that she might have suffered all of the harm I've just laid out to you. She's, so that's the basis of the clemency petition. Please release this woman so she can quietly go out into a safe third country, not the U.S., not Pakistan, but to a safe third country where she can then spend out the rest of her years with her children, Mariam and Ahmed, her surviving children, and her sister Fawzia. So we've made arrangements for all of that, and really now we have just days, just hours for Biden to do the right thing. And inshallah, we're hopeful because we have, filed a 22,000 word clemency petition with with the White House. We've been told that the White House is on notice of it. They have received it, and the reason we know this is because the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif, took a pretty extraordinary step in October of last year, where he wrote himself to Biden a personal letter outlining his, support for our clemency request. And then the Sharif government dispatched a Pakistani delegation consisting of two Pakistani senators and one of Pakistan's most premier psychiatrists to travel to the US. And they went around with us in Washington, D.C., meeting with high-level officials who some of them support Afia's clemency petition and have indicated that to the White House. So again, the president and his staff know about Afia's clemency petition. They have seen the immense amount of support in the form of well over 1 million signatures on the change.org petition that you all must have seen circulating. And if not, if you've not had a chance to sign it, please do so. So all of these things, the US government is very much on notice, and they cannot say that they did not know. And most importantly, we have, dear brave Fawzia right now in DC continuing her meetings, and she's not going to stop until the very last minute. I mean, none of us are, and God forbid if we need to keep going after Biden leaves office, and if he fails to do the right thing, then we will continue. There is a plan B, but for now, plan A is Afia's freedom through clemency in a quiet way, where we do not take names, where we do not get public about who wronged her, because while we know that information, it is not important. The family does not want sort of vengeance. They do not care to address any of that. They just need Aafia home so that she can begin that long road to recovery, inshallah.
Inshallah, most definitely. And to be honest, it's not a big ask for somebody who's been, of course, as you've said, proven with many different types of evidence to be clear of all the accusations made, and may of course, hopefully, inshallah, may phase one of this work, and if not, of course, as you mentioned, there's a plan B. From our listeners, again, I know, I'm extremely thankful for you to be awake at this time, listeners. Of course, as we know, Maria is actually it's 2:20 a.m. in Houston, where Maria is at the moment. So hugely thankful for your time this morning. Just finally, what would your call be out to our listeners who are currently listening out there? How can they help in this case in any way?
There's a lot that people can do, right? So it starts first with educating yourself on Afia's story, because that's a story of the stigma of the color of Afia's skin and her faith that has turned the story into something that's unfortunately not uncommon. Aafia is one of many wrongfully accused Muslims who were victims of the war of terror. So understanding what the system did with impunity to a woman like Aafia is so important, because we only if we understand what has happened in our history can we avoid continuing to make those mistakes, or at least demanding that those same mistakes not be made. And the reason I say that is because we cannot and must not forget that the oppression of brown and black bodies only continues. The oppression of Muslims only continues. I represent a lot of the Americans who are still stuck in Gaza after well over a year of the genocide. And this is all a continuation of sort of that U.S. complicity in the struggling of our ummah. And I think it's a duty, I think it's moral and religious duty on every Muslim to know what is happening and to use whatever resources they have available to them. Whether it be your funds, we are pro bono attorneys for Aafia. We do not charge, but this is expensive work. Use your funds to keep us going, or use your voice, whether it be your social media platform, or just your ability to sign a petition in support of Afia's clemency and keep us going that way. Or if you're not able to do any of those things, use your duas, right? right now, Afia needs duas more than ever. Fazia needs duas more than ever. So do her children. It's a very difficult time. It has been for many, many years, but the stress and the pressure of this time is particularly, it's not been easy for Afia to know that all this is going on. She's acutely aware of our efforts. I think that there is that element of hope there. When I saw her most recently, when I said to her, I'll see you next time, she got upset. She said, please don't return if you're going to just leave me here. And that was very hard for me to hear. And in that moment, I said to the prison guard, it's a no contact visit. Keep in mind, please, that her and I are both locked into separate cells and we speak over a telephone with the plexiglass. So I am not allowed to see my client as anything but a zoo animal, right? And I said, when she got upset, I said to the prison guard, my client is upset. Can I put my hand on her hand? She has not had human touch. She's had plenty of
Subhanallah.
unwanted human touch. She's had plenty of unwanted human touch for since 2003, but she's not had human touch that's wanted, that's deserved from her sister in Islam who cares and prays for her for decades. And I was refused that simple act of humanity because it's against the rules, right? So I tell you this because there's so much we can and should be doing for oppressed populations everywhere. And Afia really is the most oppressed woman, Muslim woman in the world. And right now we need all the support we can get.
Inshallah. Sister Maria, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been absolutely amazing to hear so much that you're doing, and of course Clive and also all the other attorneys and lots of people around the world. All we can do, as you mentioned, of course, the different things that you mentioned there regarding the things that we here in the UK sitting we can do, but of course not to neglect the most important, as you mentioned, of course, the power of dua, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, make this easy for your efforts, and of course may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free our sister Afia, and of course as a very, very basic human right we all of our listeners have on a daily basis, to be able to see our family, to be able to be with our children, to be able to be with our loved ones. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make that a reality for our sister and all those others who are suffering out there, who may not necessarily get to reach the media stage and out there for people to talk about. But thank you so much for your time this morning. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. May Allah protect you and your family, and may Allah, of course, grant you Jannah for all your efforts and all your team, inshallah. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you. Bye.
Jazakallah khair.